Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down the big stories. And today, we're diving into a brewing storm, all about the integrity of India's elections. And it all kicks off with one pretty surprising number. So late 2025, right? The Indian state of Bihar holds its state election. And boom, record voter turnout. I mean, we're talking 64.69%. Now, that might just sound like a number, but it's a massive 9-point jump from before. And trust me, in the world of elections, a jump that big, that's almost unheard of. It just doesn't happen. So you gotta ask, what's going on here? Okay, but here's where it gets really wild. This huge surge in voting, it happened right after a super controversial cleanup of the voter lists that kicked 6.8 million names off the rolls. Let that sink in. Higher turnout after millions of people were removed? How does that even work? Well, that's the paradox we're digging into today. It's at the very heart of this growing concern over the integrity of India's entire electoral system. All right, so first up, let's really get into what happened with this Bihar election paradox. So you had the opposition parties just hammering this point home. They were basically telling everyone, hey, they're trying to take away your right to vote. And kind of ironically, it seems like that message really lit a fire under people. It got them to the polls in record numbers. So something that was supposed to be, just a routine bit of administrative paperwork, it suddenly blew up into this huge, high-stakes fight for the future of democracy in the state.
Okay, so how did a simple voter list cleanup get so explosive? Well, to get that, we need to look at the folks in charge, the referees of the game, if you will, the Election Commission of India, or the ECI.
Now, this is a big deal. The ECI is the constitutional body that runs elections for, get this, over 970 million voters. It's the watchdog for the world's largest democracy. And for a long, long time, its independence was seen as absolutely crucial. But some recent changes have really put that independence, that neutrality, under a pretty intense microscope. And this is really the heart of the matter. Look at this timeline. In March of 2023, the Supreme Court steps in and says, hey, to keep this neutral, the Chief Justice of India needs to be on the selection committee. Makes sense, right? But then, by December of that same year, Parliament passes a new law that says, nope, we're replacing the Chief Justice with a cabinet minister. So in less than a year, a major safeguard meant to keep politics out of the ECI was just gone, overturned by the government. And this table just lays it out so clearly. Before, you had the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and the Chief Justice of India. A pretty balanced panel. Now, you've got the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and a cabinet minister picked by the PM. The independent judicial voice is just gone. What that means in practice is the government now has a clear 2-to-1 majority when it comes to picking the people who run the elections. That's a huge shift in power. Okay, so let's connect the dots here. Once you start questioning the referee's neutrality, suddenly every single call they make gets looked at with a ton of suspicion. And that brings us right back to that huge voter cleanup. Officially, this whole thing is called a Special Intensive Revision, or SIR. And on paper, it's just administrative housekeeping, right? You're deleting people who've passed away, moved, or are duplicates. The stated goal is to clean up the rolls and even weed out illegal foreign migrants. But the sheer scale of this operation and the fact that it's happening right before these big elections, well, that's what's turned it from a boring administrative task into a massive political fight. And just look at the numbers from Bihar. We're talking hundreds of thousands of names removed in single districts. When you see numbers that big, it's not surprising that it fueled accusations that this wasn't just about accuracy. People started claiming it was a deliberate attempt to target certain groups and kick the most vulnerable people off the voter lists. And listen to this. This is a quote from a former Chief Election Commissioner, O.P. Rawat. He just nails the problem here. He's saying, look, even if you assume there's no bad intent, the process itself is the problem. Think about it. If you're an economically vulnerable person, maybe a migrant worker, you're more worried about finding a day's wages than you are about tracking down documents and navigating a bureaucratic process. The system itself is set up in a way that can disenfranchise the poor, whether it's on purpose or not. Okay, so while all this is happening, the political world is in an uproar. And right in the middle of it all, India's Supreme Court steps in, and they hand down 2 massive rulings that hit 2 of the biggest issues in elections: technology and money. First, let's talk about the voting machines. The court basically said, yep, we trust the machines and the paper trail system. They rejected the idea of counting every single paper slip. But, and this is a big but, they added a totally new safeguard. They ordered that these things called symbol loading units, or SLUs, have to be sealed up and stored for 45 days. Now, what's an SLU? It's the device that loads the party symbols onto the voting machine before the election. So by saving them, the court created a way to go back and check if a machine was tampered with before anyone even voted. It's a pretty clever solution. And then there was the money. The court struck down something called the Electoral Bond Scheme. This was a huge deal. In one single move, they basically blew up the whole system of anonymous corporate and individual donations to political parties, so-called dark money. It was a massive statement, reaffirming that for an election to be fair, you have to know who's funding the players. So let's pull it all together. You've got the crazy situation in Bihar, you've got serious questions about the independence of the Election Commission, and you've got the Supreme Court making these huge rulings. All of this is basically setting the stage for 2026, because that's when a whole bunch of key state elections are happening, and they're going to be the next massive test for India's democracy. And what's happening now is a direct result of what we saw in Bihar. You've got this coordinated pushback from states run by opposition parties. They saw what happened, and now they're openly defying the ECI's voter cleanup process for their own upcoming elections. They're not just complaining, some are even planning to take the whole thing to court. So this voter cleanup thing, it's not about paperwork anymore. It's become a really powerful political rallying cry. These regional parties are now framing the 2026 elections as something much bigger than just politics. For them, it's a fight to defend their local democratic rights against what they're calling an overreach by the central government. So that really brings us to the final big question. As India gears up for 2026, can the world's biggest democracy actually restore trust in its own elections? Especially when the rules, and even the people who make the rules, are at the very center of the debate. The answer to that is going to affect hundreds of millions of people. And it leaves you thinking, the health of a democracy isn't really measured by who wins or loses on election day. It's measured by whether people still believe the game itself is fair.